Welcome to Skills for Life, a podcast about high-demand jobs that are shaping future opportunities. This show is brought to you by the North Shore Schools Foundation. I'm Dorrian, your host and a North Shore mom. Let's get started. Today on the show, I have Davina Duerr. She is state representative from the 1st District here in Washington, and she's actually my representative, so I'm super excited to get to speak with you today. Davina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kara. I'm just really excited to be here.
Yay! And my apologies for the many phone calls that you received from me on a regular basis.
It's all good.
Part of the job description, right? Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of a different conversation today because really today we want to focus on some of the fields that are, jobs of the future, fields of the future that you're actually involved with as a representative. But before we dive into that, I would love to hear a little bit about how you ended up in politics.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Short answer. So I saw an Oprah Winfrey kind of Super Soul Sunday thing that talked about two different kinds of people. The jackhammers who know exactly what they want to do and they just go for it. And the hummingbirds who aren't quite sure and they kind of pollinate around for a while. And then at some point, it just all comes together. And I'm a hummingbird. So in college, I was studying architecture. And one of my professors said that the building industry was the most polluting, material intense, energy intense industry in the world. And at that time, I considered myself an environmentalist. And I had a moment where I thought, how do I reconcile these two things? And so I got interested in sustainable architecture and I came out to Washington. Then I had babies and stayed home for a while. And I read a book called How to Do Anything. I Could Do Anything If I Just Knew What It Was. And that kind of propelled me to volunteer for the Landmark Board in Bothell, from which I got interested in local politics, ran for office in 2016. And then in 2019, after being on the Bothell City Council for 4 years, I was appointed to the House of Representatives when my representative moved up to the Senate. So.
Wow.
The shortest version I can.
I love that version. That's so cool. And I love that, that your love for the environment kind of led you into now you make the laws or are a participant in the laws to protect the environment when you started all the way over here in like the least environmentally friendly job, right? That's great.
I'm the vice chair of the Environment and Energy Committee. I'm vice chair of Local Government Committee, and I serve also on the Transportation Committee. So
amazing. So we're going to talk about those two fields today. So let's start with the environmental stuff, the alternative energy. Tell us a little bit about this field and what kind of jobs are available to our students and how that field is going to transform over the next 5 to 10 years as our students come into the workplace.
Oh gosh, I think it's just building so quickly. One of the things that I have learned recently, when we had committee days, we had a work session about capital investments into energy production. So that means the building out of new facilities to create energy. And what I learned, to my shock, was that solar and wind are now cheaper to produce those kinds of energy production facilities than coal or anything else. So it's actually now gotten to the point where solar and wind energy production is cheaper for making electricity. And we know that one of the ways that we need to rapidly change our economy and our energy production is to make it cleaner, because greenhouse gas emissions are driving climate change, and we don't have a lot of time to make that transition before certain things are baked in. Right now, I think we're just on the precipice of maybe keeping it 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, but it's actually unlikely at this point. And so now it's just a matter of ameliorating the change. And so it's driving, I think, industry at a faster and faster pace. So careers around, solar installations and engineering and, wind energy, there certainly are jobs for mechanics as those turbines have to be serviced, and obviously the manufacturing of those items as well. There's also hydrogen is becoming a real growing factor as well, because I think Washington is, I don't think it's guaranteed yet, but we're going after becoming a hydrogen hub. And hydrogen energy is very clean, particularly if it's, there are 3 types. There's green, gray, and blue. And blue hydrogen is the best, and it's made from a low greenhouse gas emission production, such as hydropower, which we happen to have a lot of. Blue is made from renewable natural gas, and gray is hydrogen produced from coal and fossil fuels, which is kind of pointless in the fight against climate change.
Right. Wow. So it sounds like for a lot of students, there's a lot of opportunities here, whether they're pursuing a trade school education, a college education, lots of different types of jobs in this field that are, just your regular jobs, also jobs that are environmentally focused, but whatever that job is, great for kids who are passionate about preventing climate change.
Exactly. And, that's not to mention all the engineering jobs, right? That are centered around creating these facilities and distributing the energy, all the way from technicians up to engineers. And there are a lot of consultants too. As more and more companies want to become green, they have to hire consultants that help them navigate how to do that.
Right. So if I'm a high school student right now and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds like a field I'd like to get involved in, what's your advice to those students in terms of classes they could be taking or things they could be doing now to get involved?
Well, it's amazing to me. There's so much information on the internet, right? I mean, sometimes I just for fun will Google, how do I blah, blah, blah. And I have no idea if it's actually something that's searchable. And it almost always is, right? So I would say, figure out what level of education you want to go after, because there's something for every level. And so if you're probably more mechanically minded or a hands-on person, maybe you want to look into being some sort of tech person that installs these kinds of facilities. Or if you're more of an engineering mind, maybe you look into engineering and look at the different careers that are available. Environmental engineers. There's also air quality engineers, as we try to track our greenhouse gas, not only where we're at, but where we want to go and the impacts of the decisions we make. That's another area. Or even architects. A lot of our architecture is moving towards, electrification of buildings and installing solar panels and different ways for architecture to be sustainable. It's hitting almost every industry, I would say, the climate change and environmental movement.
That's fantastic. So let's segue into talking about transportation, because this is also a huge part of protecting the environment and making these sustainable changes. So tell us a little bit about the way that field is transforming from the environmental lens.
Well, so transportation in Washington state accounts for about 45% of the greenhouse gas emissions that we produce.
Wow.
And I know it's crazy. And with the passage last session of a new transportation package, there was a kind of a mind-blowing investment in active transportation and transit. And so what I see happening is a lot more engineering around bikes and pedestrians, and also electrification of ferries and buses. So any technologies that have to do with producing those things, but also, even ferry drivers, for instance. I just found out recently that Washington State's kind of looking at a tsunami of retirements for ferry drivers and or captains, I guess is what they're called. But we know that those ferries are going to be needed forever as people who live on islands need to get back to the mainland and vice versa. So yeah, just so many opportunities. I mean, e-bikes are becoming a huge thing. So, the sale of e-bikes and the production of e-bikes and all the technologies around those changing vehicles for getting around, whether it's e-bikes or electric vehicles or electric buses, all of those things are opportunities for people that are interested in moving the needle on environmental change.
Wow, that's amazing. It's so fascinating how a focus on the environment can then spread in this really beautiful way to all these different types of jobs and roles, and just completely shift the focus of all these industries and produce all these new kinds of jobs for our students to be a part of.
Absolutely. And Washington State is a leader in innovation around these types of technologies. For instance, there's a startup in my district, and they're working on a 15-minute electric charging station for electric vehicles. So that's just one company in my district that's trying to make a difference. Imagine throughout the state how many other startups there are that are trying to move the needle. It's really an exciting time, and there's just so many opportunities coming our way.
And I love hearing, because I always think, as someone who was not particularly amazing at science, that is, by the way, like the understatement of the century, that, I always think of environmental stuff as really science heavy, but it just sounds like there's so many opportunities where even someone like me could make a difference and be a part of that industry without needing a massive science background. Or for students that love science, this is a perfect place for them to show up and use those skills.
Correct. And all of these companies, they need CEOs and financial advisors and marketing. I mean, anyone who's interested in, working for a better future in regards to the climate can work for a company regardless of whatever they've chosen to study, because businesses employ lots of people with different skills.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious, just to kind of go back to your first analogy about the hummingbirds versus the jackhammers. As a hummingbird, I too am a hummingbird. I'm curious, you've ended up in this just phenomenal place in your career. And what would your advice be to the hummingbirds out there?
Oh gosh, I think, something that I've been kind of telling myself lately, because life can be hard sometimes, is to not always be married to an end result, because sometimes the universe has better plans. Mm. And so being open and listening and kind of, I think, letting your heart and your instincts lead the way can eventually lead you to where you belong. You don't always know if something that's happened and pushes you in a direction is good or bad. And so just being open to kind of the signs, but having a North Star anyway, I think can lead you places that you couldn't even imagine. I never thought for a minute that I would be where I am now. So I think trusting the universe, as long as you're living your values, I think will get you farther than you can imagine.
Yeah, I love what you said at the tail end there about the values, because I think that's really what you're saying, is that it's really more about a core value that's your North Star. And how you kind of get to living that value could be very different than you think it's going to be, and being attached to the values that you hold and less attached to the thing that's going to help you live that value, if that makes sense.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You don't, when you're young, you don't know what you don't know about yourself. And sometimes you don't even know what your best skills are. But if you know what your values are, then you can be led to something incredible that you never imagined.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Very inspiring, Davina. Thank you. If people want to follow you and the work that you're doing in these different industries to promote change and be a part of that for our state and certainly for our district, what are your handles? How can people kind of pay attention to the work that you're doing and support it?
Oh, gosh. Well, there's so many ways. I have a Facebook page. If you look up State Legislator Davina Duerr, I have a Facebook page that's public. I have, you can go to the Washington State Legislature. I have a web page, and there you can sign up for newsletters, both paper and email. And my phone number is on the website, so you can always call if you have questions or want to set up a constituent meeting with me. I think that's all the ways.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and just allowing us to kind of dip a toe into these two different fields that really are on the cutting edge of tomorrow, right, for our students. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure. When I was young, I didn't know where I was headed. And so I'm happy to help people kind of navigate or just think about the possibilities.
We hope you'll join us again, and remember to hit subscribe to be notified about upcoming episodes. Join the conversation on our Facebook page, Build Skills for Life. That's Build Skills, the number 4, and then the word life. Are you interested in advertising as a sponsor for this podcast? Contact us at podcast@nsdfoundation.org. To learn more about the North Shore Schools Foundation, visit us at northshoreschoolsfoundation.org. Thanks for listening.